Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Dog Walk, the one take, uncut, unedited, almost daily show where I take my dogs out for a walk and discuss whatever's been on my mind for that day. I try to record myself in this uncut and unedited manner because I think it's the only way to be authentic. There's too much self censoring, editing, and changing of the messages on YouTube in order to try to look as polished and make people make themselves look as good as possible. That's not me. I want to show the true me. I want to be authentic. I think the only way to do that is by not editing my videos. So that's why I recorded in this way. That being said, I do put timestamps in the description, so feel free to look in there and jump around to whatever section interests you in my video so that I don't waste your time, because I do sometimes tend to ramble. Speaking of which, before I get to the main topic of today, I want to discuss a little bit about my situation, because today is very likely the last video that I will be recording before my month-long trip to China. Today is, oh my god, what's the date today? The 7th of March? And tomorrow my parents will be coming over to take the dogs and bring them to their place in Tabla. Girls, what's over there? Come on. For a day early, because I can't fit every single thing in my car when you're talking about supplies for the dogs for a month, plus everything that we are bringing to China with us. So my parents will be coming and taking the dog. We will be joining them in Mont Tremblant the next day. So they're coming Friday. Today's Thursday. We will be joining them on Saturday. So I might record a video on Saturday in Mont Tremblant, but I'm not even sure I'll be able to do that and or even post it before I leave. This video, although it's being recorded just before I leave, actually the way the schedule works out, it's going to be posted the day before we're scheduled to return from China. So at this point, depending on whether I post one more video or not before we go, this will kind of be the last video that I pre-recorded in the bank. I started with a bank of video knowing I was going to China, but by the time you watch the next video or the one after that in this list, it should be much more real time. I recorded one day and then posted the next day or very shortly thereafter. So look forward to my being able to answer your topics or questions or things like that much more quickly in the very near future for you, in a bit further future for me. I mean, that would be true if I had any viewers. Maybe a miracle will happen while I'm gone and I'll actually gain some subscribers or followers, because right now I'm still averaging perhaps about one view per day on my entire channel, if that. And I'm up to recording, it would be episode 45 at this point, so one view per day over and 45, that's not counting the fact that several of the videos I posted were two-parters, so it's probably about closer to 60 videos that I've posted and still averaging less than one view per day. I've had 2 comments in the entirety of my channel and very few likes. Not that it matters, that's not the goal of my channel, I've said that many times before, but still, hey, we'll see. Maybe I'll reach some people with some of the topics that I have in line for you that I've scheduled to post every other day while I am gone. So that's a bit too much about the channel. I think I should get to today's topic, which I think will be relatively topical for me by the time I get back, because the weather has been crazy. We're up to the double digits now. There's supposed to be another frost coming, but really everything is waking up, and I'm gonna miss out my opportunity that I normally take to start, or that I wanted to take to start my non permaculture plants indoors in the grow tent that I have, because I'll be gone in China. But I do want to talk about that topic as everything is waking up. More specifically, today I want to talk about permaculture, because that's one of the few videos that has gotten more than 2 views on my entire channel. So I thought that perhaps there could be some limited interest in the topic, and especially since I live in a northern climate. I mean, I live in Canada, and I don't see that much content about permaculture in northern climates. In fact, the only channel that I know of, which is a great channel, by the way, I highly recommend it. I'll post a link in the description below. It's Canadian Permaculture Legacy. Guy is very similar to me. He's an engineer and he lives in Ontario, and a lot of what I've learned about permaculture I learned from him. So if you see this, Keith Saint Jean, I believe is his name. Yeah, you're very much my inspiration, so thanks for that. And he's very approachable. In fact, way back when I was first starting to look into designing my permaculture, my food forest, I sent him a few questions, and he sent me a very lengthy, very detailed response, which I really appreciated. So again, thanks, Keith. So yes, now let's get to the main topic at hand, which is permaculture. I just want to go through the very basics of what are the principles, the concepts of permaculture, what does it mean in the first place, and how do you kind of design a permaculture system. So first, permaculture, what does it mean, or I'll start with the goal and the reason why I think it's awesome. And the reason why I think it's awesome is that it's great for quote unquote lazy people and quote unquote cheap people. What I mean by that is there might be a larger investment at the start compared to just buying seeds of tomato and cucumber plants and just putting them in your yard. But the goal of a permaculture garden is to establish an ecosystem. And I say garden, you can say permaculture garden, I could say a food forest, it's all in my mind equivalent, so pardon my flip-flopping between different terms. But yeah, the goal of permaculture is to establish a system that mimics nature and that is self-sustaining. Because one of the big things that is true about normal gardening, well, there's several disadvantages to normal gardening or normal agriculture, modern agriculture practices, but one of the main disadvantages of it is that you have to constantly maintain it, right? Every gardener knows that you need to fertilize your garden, you need to get rid of your pests, you need to do your weeding, all of that stuff, right? And permaculture says, no, don't do that. The only reason why you have to do that is because you are trying to create something that looks good for humans, that makes sense from a human perspective, but nature is not humans. Humans are part of nature, but natural systems are not the straight line and the nice rows and the segregated areas that humans like. I mean, just look here, right? There's trees, big trees, small trees, there's little shrubs, there's a river, there's grasses, there's everything in there. It's a complete self-sustaining ecosystem, and that's what you're in. And every part of it is interdependent, and every part of it fulfills a function. So that's what permaculture is. The other thing, as I mentioned, you need to do this and that, right? You need to weed, you need to fertilize. Well, sorry, I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit here. Please pardon, this won't be the most organized video. I want to organically get from one topic to the next as it pops into my head. So, yeah. And yes, pun is totally intended there. The reason why you need to do all those things is that nature is designed in such a way as every function needs to be fulfilled. So when you decide to take over the function of weeding, what you are telling nature is that I am the animal, I am the being, I am the thing that is going to be taking care of these quote-unquote invasive species. And from now on, since I took on this role, nature, you don't need to worry about it. And that means that I need to do it forever. And as soon as I stop doing it, as soon as you stop weeding your garden, well, the weeds come back, right? Because you're no longer fulfilling the function that you told the ecosystem that you tried to establish that you would be doing. Same thing is true for pests, right? Why is there so much rebound from one year to the next in pest populations? Any gardener likely knows what I mean. That's because when you take your insecticide and kill everything, you're not just killing the bad bugs, you're also killing the good bugs. They're predators, right? So you are taking on the role of the apex predator in your ecosystem, and so nature goes, okay, buddy, you got this, right? So what happens when you don't got this? It means that everything comes back. It means that forevermore, since you are now the apex predator and you killed the population of all the good beneficial insects that you to feed and prey on the quote-unquote bad insects, well, now since you killed them all, they're not there. So that means that next year from your neighbor's yard all the bad insects can come in, and since they have no predators, they thrive and their population booms, right? So that's why there's always this pest boom and bust cycle in well manicured human maintained gardens, because you told nature you would be doing this job, so now you have to do it forevermore. Same thing goes with fertilizer, right? Actually, I won't go into that part because that's part of the functions that hopefully I'll be able to get to, the functions of permaculture plants. So another thing about permaculture that is completely contrary to most normal, and I say normal in big quotes, right? I mean more like kind of traditional or standard human gardening practices, is that you will plant very densely, and you plant a polyculture as opposed to a monoculture, right? Poly, many, mono, one, right? So if you go to an apple orchard or to a beet farm, a Dwight Schrute, or to whatever type of cultivation it is, right? Most humans tend to make big plots and cultivate only one thing there. Well, where and when have you ever seen that anywhere in nature? That's not a thing. Just like when you go in nature, when have you ever seen a spot of bare ground? Never, right? I mean, of course, you'll come with a counter example of saying, yeah, the Sahara Desert is bare, ha ha ha, gotcha. Okay, fine, whatever. But I'm talking about thriving natural ecosystems, right? Where else do you see just a lawn with only grass, right? In nature. Nowhere. Even if you go to the plains in Africa, there's not just one type of grass. There's not just grass. There's many different levels, and everything is close by. There is no rule in real nature that every fruit tree must be planted 20 meters away from the next one, right? That's not a thing. That's not how nature works. So permaculture encourages you to have lots of different things in the same spot, and to have much more densely packed plants than you would in a normal cultivation, because you're not trying to strive for how do I say, efficiency, and to preserve, every single apple that grows on your tree must be consumed by you and preserved from predators at all costs, right? No, you take the opposite approach. You say, hey, I'm gonna grow 20 fruit trees, and out of those, 5 won't survive, or 5 will survive. Doesn't really matter. Out of those 5, 20% of my apples are gonna get eaten by bugs, or by birds, or whatever it is. But still, in that area, in the end, the 5 or 15 fruit trees that survive, even when you take into account the loss of 20% of their what they bear, will still give you much more food than you would get from just a single apple tree in that entire area. Plus, you're also getting, raspberries from underneath it, or carrots from the ground, etc. Right? So everything is less efficient, but you just get so much more quantity that in the end it doesn't matter. And in the meantime, you're also feeding your ecosystem. So I know those are a lot of very high-minded principles right now. Hopefully you're still following me to that point. If not, please don't hesitate to ask questions. But I guess I'll go into right now a bit, and since this is very much a 101, and I'll have a lot more to say about actual design, but for now, let's just say I'll go into sort of the basic principles, or design principles, or sorry, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say sort of the basic anatomy of a food forest. And many sources, if not most sources, will say that there's 7 layers to the food forest. And actually, before I say that, what's the difference between a food forest or a permaculture garden and just a regular forest? Well, at the basic level, sorry, I forgot to wear gloves today, and my hand is a little cold, so I'm just going to switch hands here. Try not to drop the dog leashes. Thank you, Mista, for not pulling for once. Okay, switch done. Let's keep going. Okay, so at the surface level, there really is no difference. In fact, your goal, as I said at the top of this, is to imitate what Mother Nature does, because she's been doing this for millions of years. She probably knows her stuff, right? So you're actually trying to imitate the same way that nature designs itself, its systems. But the difference is that instead of using just any random plant, any random tree, what you do is you use plants and trees that are beneficial to you. So every single layer, every single function of a forest, of a real forest, can be imitated in a food forest. The big difference is you pick and choose how to fulfill those functions, what trees will be doing it, and only pick and choose those that are useful to you. So what are these layers. I'll get into the functions. Actually, no. I'll briefly describe a few functions. So, for example, there's a function that's called dynamic accumulators. So, what that means is there are what you consider a weed, which are actually pioneer plants. You know, those things that always grow where you don't want them to. Those fulfill a function in nature. They are there to take a barren or infertile location, and through their chemistry transform that into a fertile location. So there's dynamic accumulators, the deep taproot. What they do is like a comfrey or even dandelions, things like that. Basically, they are plants that come in and they will go where other plants can't, and they will start to extract nutrients, extract things that are useful for plants to grow, like phosphorus, nitrogen, etc. Nitrogen fixing is another function, quote unquote, of the food forest or of the forest. And they will take, they will drive. Comfrey has roots that can drive like literally tens of meters down, straight down into the ground. And they will sort of mine the soil, just like a coal miner would for humans, and take out all the valuable resources and bring them up through the root to their leaves. But then that plant dies, whether it's at the end of the year and they come back next year, right? But all the leaves have died, or they actually die and don't come back. But the point is that Mista, what are you eating? Hey. Sorry, Mista picked up something on the ground. Yeah, today was trash day. That's why the dogs keep sniffing the side of the road. Yeah, so sorry. They die out, right? But their leaves stay on the ground, and then they start to decompose, and then suddenly all those nutrients. Girls, I want you to walk in the center of the street because I am tired of you eating trash. Those leaves decompose, and now suddenly all the nutrients that used to be completely unavailable because they were buried deep down or they were locked in with other non-nutrients, like other chemicals, I'll say, or other elements that aren't beneficial for plants. Well, suddenly those nutrients now come to the surface, decompose, and become bioavailable to the next generation of plants that will use that in order to grow. So they basically act like fertilizer. And one of the big stars of permaculture actually is comfrey. There's other examples, like for I mentioned nitrogen fixing earlier, like sea buckthorns or pea shrubs are another example of that, where you actually grow that plant simply to get its leaves and to chop it down and just drop the leaves on the ground, or in your compost pile if you really want to. But you can literally just take the plant, chop it, drop it on the ground, and then that acts as a ground cover that will protect the moisture in your soil, but also that will decompose into nutrients for your other plants. So that's one function in the food forest. There's a bunch of other ones, but I just wanted to give an example of. So when you design your permaculture garden, you don't necessarily have to say, oh, I absolutely need this plant or that plant or that plant. Oh, I really have to have a blueberry shrub, even though I really hate eating blueberries. No, what you do is you figure out what function exists, and as long as you've got something in your system that fulfills that function, you're good to go. So you can actually choose what you like, and you don't have to follow a specific template and this is the only way and the only design, which is what's great about it. You can customize everything to your liking, and as long as you get every function covered, you're golden. You're good to go. So that's something that I think is really awesome. You don't have to just, you don't have to have the tomato plant and the cucumber and the this and the that in your garden. You pick and choose which, I'll say, veggies. I don't mean veggies, but I'm trying to equate it to traditional gardening. You pick and choose what you want to grow in your garden, and that's super great. So sorry, that was a very long aside. I want to quickly wrap it up. I'll have to again get back to this topic, but the other thing I really wanted to, actually, that was the one thing I really wanted to explain, and since I organically went through a bunch of different topics, whatever came into my mind, I haven't even gotten to it. So the one thing I wanted to really describe are the different layers of a food forest. Most resources you'll find online will quote 7 different layers. I'd argue that there's actually sort of 6 plus layers. But to define what those layers are, and the reason why you can plant so much, again, in a permaculture or a food forest, is that you are utilizing every single layer in every single location. So you're not just planting one thing in every square foot. You're not just planting in 2D. You're planting 7 things in every square foot. You're planting in 3D. And as everyone knows, you can get a lot more stuff done in 3D than in 2D, right? So what are those layers? Well, the first layer is the canopy. So it's the huge, I don't know if you can see that, it's really dark, but it's a huge tree, the huge pine, like, see here with the light, we can see that a little bit better, right? So it's the super tall thing that provides shade, and that's over everything else. That's the first layer. That would be, your 20-foot tall or 20 meter tall, or whatever it is, apple tree, or your super large hazelnut tree, or whatever it is, right? That are big, massive things that take years and years to grow, and that are kind of the crown achievement of the forest, right? Then what comes under that is what they call the under canopy trees. So those are your smaller trees that maybe grow up to, I don't know, 10 feet, 15 feet, something like that, that live underneath your massive tree, but that is still over and out of reach of everything else on the ground. So that would be sort of your dwarf fruit trees and things of that nature. Which, by the way, if you didn't know, you can buy different rootstock. One thing you learn from looking into permaculture, you can buy a whole bunch of different rootstocks, and based on what rootstock you get, the same type, apple, Macintosh apple, or whatever, could yield you a 20-meter tall tree or a 2-meter tall tree, depending on the rootstock, which I think is pretty cool. So anyway, and typically dwarf rootstocks tend to produce less fruit, but they produce fruit much faster compared to full-size trees. Anyway, so you've got the canopy, you've got the under canopy. Then what comes next is the shrub layer. So those are things that are, up to a few feet tall, and that are still above the ground, but that don't quite reach the height of a tree. So that would be your raspberry bushes, your blueberry bushes, that type of shrubs. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Everyone knows what shrubs are. And this is where typically you will find a lot of berries. So in a small space like mine, I've got a very small lot. I don't have an overstory or a canopy layer. That's just too big, too tall, and I don't have the time to grow it. So my canopy is actually sort of the second layer, the under canopy. So then my second layer is and that would be my peach trees, my apple trees, my plum trees, etc. Then the second layer, shrubs, that's where you get all your raspberries, your blueberries, your haskell's, another aside, one great thing about permaculture is you can grow stuff that's not available in the grocery store because either people don't know about it or it doesn't transport well. So you can get some extremely healthy, extremely tasty berries or fruit like haskaps or pawpaws that no one's ever even heard about, but that are even more nutritious and more tasty than what's available at the grocery store or in any organic farm. So yeah, that's 1, 2, 3, right? Third layer is the shrub. Then the next layer I'm gonna skip. That's the one that I'm sort of debating. But what comes next after that is the ground layer. What's that is, exactly what it sounds like, right? It's stuff that grows on the ground. So that could be, and that provides ground cover, which protects your soil, your moisture, and that doesn't compete with things that are higher up. So that could be, to take a very common example that you can relate to, your strawberry plants, right? Those grow on the ground. They don't grow tall, but they provide you more berries. That's also where you'll see a lot of like medicinal, like let's say mint or things like that. Those are all ground covers or ground layer. Next, you have the root layer or rhizosphere. So this is anything that utilizes or that grows at ground level, under the ground. So your carrots, your Jerusalem artichokes, everything like that. Anything that's a root crop. Which again, I don't think I need to give more examples of that. So that's 5 layers. And then the 6th layer is all the vines and climbers that can utilize your bushes and your trees in order to climb. So that would be your grapevines or your Arctic kiwis and things like that. So those are the 6 layers that I really believe in. And then the 7th layer that many people name is the herbaceous layer. So those are sort of your mid-size, mostly like herbal plants, like let's say chamomile or St. John's wort or things like that. I don't really consider that as a layer in itself because really it varies in size from ground layer all the way up to sort of shrub layer size. So really, the way I see it is I incorporate the herbaceous layer sort of integrated within the either the ground cover layer or the shrub layer, depending on what size of herbaceous plant you're talking about. And again, remember, the most important thing in permaculture design is the functions. So I think that's where I'm going to stop for now because I've already been talking for over half an hour. I hope you enjoyed this very quick intro into permaculture, and I will be talking more about this if you're interested. Thanks for your attention, and please let me know down in the comments what you'd like to hear more about. And once I plant the 80 trees and shrubs that I have ordered into my very small 25-foot wide by 40-foot deep perimeter yard, I will definitely update you on that. On that note, thanks for your attention, and I'll see you when I'm back from China.